Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to week 13 uh, of this class, Biblical Interpretations. As is tradition, my name is James. I'm a husband and a father, and I own an automotive business. I have a degree in biblical and theological studies in ancient Near Eastern history, although I'm not an expert in anything. Um, We started this class back in October to discuss a specific epistemological and hermeneutic framework I have developed over the course of my life. We've spent 8 weeks building a foundational paradigm so that I could say the following sentence and hope that it makes sense. The revelation of God is inherently contradictory. The biblical text describes a God defined beyond all human knowledge that also wants to be known by humanity. The moment the knowledge of God transcends the boundary between what is not known and becomes what is known, that God no longer is transcendent of knowledge, but rather is continuous and becomes defined by what is known. And so, this is the fundamental concern of the biblical text. How can humanity know God without God being entirely defined by all that is known? This is the fundamental issue we are seeking an answer for. Another way to think of it is, how can God be known as this without becoming known as something like this? And so here is our completed map as of the end of last week. So far, we've traced 4 generations in the text. So it is at this point in our journey that the text takes a turn for the worst. So before we start part 2 of the story of Jacob, I want to do a quick recap of the stories we've read, kind of summarizing everything to this point. So let's take out map number 1, and we will begin here. So we began with an empty map, and we discussed Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how geography and geology affect water, and water affects trade routes. We took a blue marker and we marked the flow of trade between Europe, Africa, and Asia. And in doing so, we see this region that we traced in red. And we called this region the land in between. We called it this because it's the land in between the land everybody wanted. We took a yellow marker and we highlighted the surrounding regions and empires, noting there are no empires inside of the land in between. Empires such as Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon. We then started in Genesis 11 with the story of Terah, the father of Abraham. Terah had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran, and they all lived in Ur. Terah leaves Ur to make his way to the land in between. So he begins traveling up the Euphrates River, goes through Mari, and makes his way to Haran. Upon arriving in Haran, Terah stops. He settles. He becomes stagnant. He returns to his ancestral trade of crafting and selling idols, and loses his potential blessing of being remembered as the patriarch of the world's greatest religions. We then read Genesis 12, and we see God tell Terah's son Abram to leave Haran and proceed onward to Canaan. So Abram heads south. He follows the trade route through Damascus, and he arrives at Shechem and builds an altar. So now we look at map number 2. And Abram reaches Canaan. And like you at the start of this class, he probably knew nothing about the land in between. So we have an empty map, a clean slate. And we began by discussing the main geological regions and how they determine the trade routes. We went from west to east and we highlighted the Mediterranean, the coastal plain, the Shephelah, the hill country, the wilderness, the Transjordanian mountains, and the southern boundary, that being the Negev, and Nahal Besor. From here, we then took blue markers and we traced the trade routes. We began with the main trade route on the coastal plain, the International Coastal Highway, also called the Via Maris, the main trade route in and out of the land, the highway that has all the cats, the bigwigs, the money, and the ballers. We then traced the alternate international trade route, the one with no access to water. That is the Transjordanian Highway. We then traced the east-west routes that connect these international routes. One in the north, one in the center, and one in the south. We discussed how these trade routes determined where the fortified cities are, that controlling these cities was what it meant to be a kingdom or an empire, to be able to tax the trade routes. We discussed how the fact these cities are fortified, the fact they're fortified is the reasons why these cities are still known and are a part of pop culture to this day. And it's also the reason why these cities show up in the text so often. Cities such as Armageddon or Har Megiddo in Jericho. So we took red markers and we underlined these cities of significance. We then traced the central local highway, the route where the local Canaanites lived, up in the hills, away from the mice, down on the coast, or away from the cats, down on the coastal plain. We then continued reading in Genesis 12. And we took a green marker and we traced Abram's route into Canaan from Haran. We see Abram enters the land from Damascus, goes down the Transjordanian Highway, across the Rift Valley, and he first goes to Shechem and builds an altar. From Shechem, he proceeds down the ridge route. He proceeded towards Bethel. He pitches his tent and builds another altar. From Bethel, he continued south, passes through Hebron, down to Beersheba, and then he enters into the Negev. Upon arriving there, he immediately faces a famine. So he continues south to Egypt. We then read Genesis 12, and we read this bizarre story of Abraham telling Pharaoh that his wife Sarai is his sister. And we see the concept of moral hierarchy. Abraham then returns from Egypt and he sojourns in the Negev. We then read Genesis 13 and we see Abram and Lot are at Bethel, and they come to the conclusion that the land cannot sustain them both. So we see the first point of separation. They go separate ways, and Lot heads to what becomes known as Edom in the Transjordan. We then skipped Genesis 14, and we read Genesis 15. And we saw the seed planted for what becomes the third generation in the story of Isaac. God promises Abram his descendants will possess the land, and this promise is proven by Isaac being born in, living in, and never leaving the land. Last week, we read Genesis 16 and Genesis 21 in the story of Sarai and Hagar and the birth of Ishmael. And we see another point of separation as Ishmael settles in the wilderness of Paran, south of the Negev. We then read Genesis 20, and we saw Abraham go to Gerar, and he meets Abimelech. And we see the same story repeat, where Abraham tells a king that his wife is his sister. And in Genesis 21, we see a fight over a well that Abraham dug in Beersheba and a peace treaty made between Abraham and Abimelech. Then we read Genesis 23, and Abraham goes to Hebron and he negotiates with the Hittites, that is, the cats, who are controlling the mice's local trade route. And he purchases land outside of Hebron to bury his wife Sarah. We then read Genesis 24, and Abraham sends his servant back to Haran to find a wife from his kindred or his family. He gets to Haran and meets Rebekah at a well. He pays a bride price to Rebekah's father Bethuel, the son of Nahor, Abraham's brother. Rebekah leaves in haste and makes the same journey to Canaan that Abraham made. We then read Genesis 25, and we saw Abraham dies in the land and is buried outside of Hebron in the same place as Sarah. In Genesis 25, we read the birth of Jacob and Esau and the hatred that develops between them. We then read Genesis 26, and we saw Isaac experience another famine, and he is explicitly told not to go to Egypt. So he goes to Gerar instead, just like Abraham. And while in Gerar, he meets none other than Abimelech. And we see the same story repeat, where Isaac calls Rebekah his sister. We also see the same quarreling and peace treaty involving the wells of Abraham. Last week, we then read Genesis 28 and how the anger between Jacob and Esau boils over. Esau follows the orange line on our map down to the Ishmaelites to find a wife from his ancestors. And Jacob, meanwhile, flees for his life. And he goes back to Haran to find a wife from his ancestors. On his way, he sleeps in Bethel, like Abraham did, and he has a dream in which God tells him even if he leaves the land of Canaan, God will bring him back, which I find very interesting. So now we want to take out map number 2, and we want to draw green arrows going in reverse. So from Beersheba to Shechem, just draw an arrow at the top of the line you already have, just in the opposite direction. So like this. We're going to go backwards. We're going Beersheba to Shechem. Just draw an arrow pointed up. These arrows you already have, just put an arrow at the top going the opposite direction. Does that make sense?
No, where? There's Haran. There's Beersheba.
You don't have this finished.
I don't.
No, you got it from later.
Okay.
So you just
From here?
Yeah, just put an arrow at the top of that line.
Oh.
We're just reversing the flow.
Okay.
Because everybody goes backwards. There we go. Beersheba to Shechem. Shechem to Damascus. And then Damascus to Haran. Okay. So we then read Genesis 29. And we read that Jacob stays in Haran for 14 years. He lives and works for his great uncle Laban, and he wants to marry his cousin Rachel. Jacob has nothing because he fled in haste. So Jacob agrees to work for 7 years in exchange for the bride price of Rachel. However, Laban tricks Jacob, and Jacob has to marry Leah first. 7 years later, Jacob then finally gets to marry Rachel, but he still has nothing. So he negotiates terms to obtain a flock, and he works for another 6 years for Laban while building up his wealth. And in Genesis 30, we read about the births of Jacob's children. After 7 years, Jacob has 4 sons with Leah: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel, who is infertile and envious that she can't have children, gives her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a wife. So Jacob then has 2 sons with Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah, who becomes barren, and is envious that Jacob has sons with Rachel's servant Bilhah, gives her servant Zilpah to Jacob as a wife. Jacob then has two sons with Zilpah, Gad and Asher. Then Leah is no longer barren, and she has two more sons, Issachar and Zebulun. And then we see an important division in the pattern, and the text says, afterward, Leah bore a daughter and called her Dinah. And then, just when you think this Jerry Springer episode is ending, Rachel, who is the only person in this household to not have kids with Jacob, finally bears a son. This happens as soon as Jacob completes the final 7 years of bartering for the bride price. So the tradition was and this is still a tradition today in a lot of places and cultures, when a man would marry a wife, you would you have to exchange value, in essence. And it's about the trade-off of the family losing the daughter. Okay? So you're exchanging value. So that's kind of what the bride price is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Jacob has nothing because he fled from Esau. So he can't pay a bride price. That's why he spends 14 years working for Laban. Does that make sense? So he barters it. Okay. And that's the point here.
Okay.
Is Rachel doesn't have kids until after 7 years. Okay? So the whole process takes 14 years. So, and her son is Joseph. Okay? So, finally, we see the fifth generation from Terah come into existence. So the preservation of life is happening. They've made it thus far. So now I want you to remember this. Where are all of these people born? They're not in Canaan. They're all born in Haran. So again, so far, the only person in this entire story who is born in the land they are supposed to be in is Isaac. So now let's continue on. We come to Genesis 31. Again, note the repetition of places and themes. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all his wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was, and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served my father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock bore spotted. And if he said, the stripes shall be your wages, then all the flock bore stripes. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see. All the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our fathers belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do." So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock and his possession that he had acquired in Padan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. He fled with all that he had, and arose and crossed the Euphrates, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him for 7 days, and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen pitched tents in the hill country of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob answered and said to Laban, "Because I was afraid. For I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. Anyone with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have that is yours, and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he did not find them. And he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them in the camel's saddle and sat on them. Laban felt all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, "Let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the way of women is upon me." So he searched but did not find the household gods. Then Jacob became angry and berated Laban. Jacob said to Laban, "What is my offense? What is my sin, that you have hotly pursued me? For you have felt through all my goods. What have you found of all your household goods? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, that we may decide between us two. 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried. I bore the loss of myself. From the hand you required it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was by day, the heat consumed me, and the cold by night, and my sleep fled from my eyes. These 20 years I have been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father and the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night." Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, "The daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for their children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. And Jacob said to his kinsmen, "Gather stones." And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." Therefore he named it Gilead and Mitzpah, and he said, "The Lord watch between you and me when we are out of one another's sight. If you oppress my daughters, or if you take wives beside my daughters, although no one is with us, see, God is witness between you and me." Then Laban said to Jacob, "See this heap and the pillar which I have set between you and me. This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me to do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. Early in the morning, Laban arose, kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned home. Ooh. Okay. So now, let's take out map number 2. And we want to start at the top in Damascus. We want to take a yellow marker. You're good? You brought your own markers.
I read in my kid's stash.
There you go. Okay, so start in Damascus and go south, and we want to actually wait. We already have. We're looking for Ramoth Gilead, just south of Damascus on the Transjordanian Highway, and I think we already have it highlighted.
Yeah, we already. Are we doing it in yellow?
Yep, highlighted yellow. So here's the. You can highlight Damascus up here. That's a major.
So I already have it, right? Are we doing from this point to this point?
Yep.
Okay.
And then down to this road here, right here, Ramoth Gilead. So highlight that. You find it back there? Yep. Excellent. Okay, so now we want to take an orange marker. We're going to take an orange marker, and remember, orange is points of division. So take an orange marker, and we're going to draw a line following the route from Damascus south to Ramoth Gilead, like this. See it?
Yeah, we just did that. Yeah.
All right, well, do it in one.
Okay.
I meant highlight.
Because it made me think I did something wrong.
I messed it up. It was my fault. Okay. So, when we get to Ramoth Gilead, either underline or make a small X next to Ramoth Gilead with the orange. We're trying to just symbolize.
So you said X?
Yeah, just make like a small X right there at Ramoth Gilead. Yep. With your orange. Yep, from here, follow that line down. Yep. Okay. So that this orange line represents the extent Laban traveled into the region to find Jacob. So now, a couple of key notes about Genesis 31. 1. In verse 3, we see God tell Jacob to go back to the land of his kindred. This verse is like the closing of a parenthesis that started in Genesis 28, when Jacob was at Bethel. In Genesis 28, God says it is okay to go to Haran. And in Genesis 31, God says it is okay to go back. 2. Notice, in the past, when referring to Abraham, Haran is called the land of Abraham's kindred, whereas now Jacob is in Haran and Canaan is being called the land of his kindred. Why? Because of where they were born. I've mentioned in the past, one of the primary ideals of ancient Semitic thought was to live on and die on the land you were born on. This is the goal. Abraham is born in Ur, his father lives in Haran, and Abraham dies in Canaan. From the eyes of the people in Ur, he failed. Isaac is born in Canaan, lives in Canaan, and dies in Canaan. He succeeded. Jacob is born in Canaan and leaves the Haran. His father Isaac is actually still alive in the Negev, while Jacob is living in Haran for 20 years. So, of course, Jacob needs to get back to Canaan. He needs to go back to his father. This is the entire goal. And this is why Canaan is the land of Jacob's kindred, where Haran is the land of Abraham's kindred. 3. We read in Genesis 31:4, verse 4, that Jacob tells Leah and Rachel, "We need to leave because the God of my father has told me to go." In essence, their reply is they ask, "How do you know?" He says he knows because it's the same God that told him at Bethel. So again, we see another instance where the identity of the knowledge of God is based on the fulfillment of promise or covenant. Jacob knows it's the right path to take in hindsight. No other God would tell him to leave the land in which he was born. Thus, it is the same God telling him to go back. We read in Genesis 31:19, Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And ooh, this is interesting. Again, I'll ask, where are they? They are in Haran. When was the last time we came across the gods of the father's household in Haran? If you remember, it was a month ago, and it was when we started this story with Terah. It is likely, in my opinion, that Rachel steals the very gods that Terah had crafted and eventually passed down to Laban. These same gods may be the very reason Terah stopped in Haran and never reached Canaan. So why did Rachel do this? Why did she steal the gods? One idea stems from verse 14, where Rachel says, "Is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has told us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children, and then whatever God has said to you, do." So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. Okay, so when I read this story, what I see are ideals that are attempted at being upheld, that result in compromise after compromise after compromise, none of which God wanted or intended, but accepts. And in the end, nobody is doing what they should be doing. Laban never should have lied to Jacob to force Jacob to work for him for 7 years in order to marry Leah, and then force him to work another 7 years in order to marry Rachel, and then work another 6 years to shepherd Laban's flock. What should have happened, like with Abraham and Rebekah, Jacob would pay a bride price to Laban, and Jacob and Rachel would return to the land of Jacob's kindred. This would be the standard. Jacob, seemingly having to flee from Esau so quickly, didn't own anything, so he bartered his labor for the bride price, which is what makes what Laban did so dreadful, because he deliberately manipulated Jacob in having to stay in Haran when he otherwise was supposed to leave. By the end, Leah and Rachel are also completely over it. Why? Because they also have suffered as a result of Laban's actions. You'll notice Leah doesn't give birth to the first son, Reuben, until after the 7-year barter is over. And Rachel doesn't give birth to her first son, Joseph, until the 7 years for her barter is over, totaling 14 years. That is not how the marriage custom is supposed to work. So when they say our father sold us, it's because their father did not uphold his patriarchal responsibility of appropriate marriage for his daughters, because he manipulated Jacob, Leah, and Rachel into remaining in Haran and working for him for 14 years. We read in verses 26 through 29, and Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and trick me and did not tell me, so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre?" Notice he wants to have a wedding now, 20 years later. "Why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power, my sovereign power, to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. So now you have to go away, because you long greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" So again, we see Laban acknowledge his sovereign authority allows him to cause harm to others if he so chooses. And the only thing stopping him was a dream. And in the end, he is willing to move on from everything except for one thing. That being who stole his gods. So by the end of the story, Jacob has received in return everything that Laban had denied of him for 20 years. So now we read Genesis 32. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. So let's take a green marker. We want to find Ramoth Gilead, where we just were. We want to go south, and we're looking for Gerasa.
Following the same route.
Yeah. Looking for right here, Gerasa. That's off the main route. Nice, good job. That one can be a hard one to find. Okay, we found it. Okay. So we're looking for Gerasa, and then we're looking just west. And we're looking for the Yabok Canyon. It's Jabbok. Yabok Canyon. No. We're looking for Mahanaim, which is at the bottom of the Yabok Canyon. And right there's Mahanaim.
With Gilead?
Yeah. Here you have it.
Yep, you got it.
Here you have it.
If you want, you could actually do a green line from Damascus all the way following this route down to Mahanaim.
This is the canyon, that's the.
Yep, you got it. Okay, good. Cool. So after Jacob's run with Laban, he heads down the canyon to Mahanaim. So this is what that looks like. Okay. Now I'm going to read all of Genesis 32. So here we go. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." So he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, "Thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell you, my lord, in order that I may find favor in your sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you, and there are 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two camps, thinking, if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do you good, and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him he took a present for his brother Esau, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, Pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and handed, or put a space between drove and drove. He instructed there first, When Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, To whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, They belong to your servant Jacob. They are present sent to my lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and the third and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, Moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. And the same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and he crossed the ford of the Yabok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, Let me go, for the day has broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, What is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, Please tell me your name. But he said, Why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. Okay, so now, returning to our map. 1. It says Esau is in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. If we remember, when Jacob fled from Esau, Jacob went to Haran, but Esau went to Ishmael. And now it says Esau is in Seir in the land of Edom. So now we need to draw an orange arrow. Starting in the south, in the sojourns of Ishmael, that's down here. Orange. So in the sojourns of Ishmael in the south, and we want to connect it to Edom. So I'm going to have to show you all how to do this. So, and it's ironic that Esau goes to Edom, because it's the same place Lot went back in Genesis 13. So take an orange marker and draw an arrow like this. So on my map, we had already drawn this line for Ishmael, and we already drew this line for Lot a month ago.
Beersheba?
Coming out of Beersheba, yeah. What you got here?
Yeah, where's Edom?
Over here. So that's, again, what I'm trying to say is Esau does the same thing. He just makes the same journey that previous generations had already made. but because some of you don't have your maps fully filled out,
Yeah.
so you can. So you basically see this kind of half circle. Make like that half circle there. And then from there, you're gonna come up here to Beersheba.
Just general
Yeah,
area.
just in general.
Arrow.
Yep. Make an arrow. You've got it.
This-
That's what this
yeah.
is.
And then one back up.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
they don't go back though.
I just added. That's what I just added.
Beersheba?
Yeah, so that's literally what you're
I thought
adding
it
right
was
now.
I thought
You
it
just
was
do it
Eden.
the opposite arrow.
Right now.
Oh.
Because he made the same route.
Yeah, I know, I thought it was Eden.
Oh,
It's okay. Totally okay.
No, I thought you said Eden.
Well, it's just it's the route, you know. Yeah, just like that. Yep. And then from here for Beersheba, follow this route over here. So the
From there
blue
to-
line, we're on orange line going from Beersheba over to here.
where's
Oh.
here? Like, where's the
Yeah.
end point?
Mount Seir.
Okay, that area.
Yep. The general area. Because it's a region. It's not so much a town.
I got
Yeah, you got this. So then you'll draw an arrow, an orange one from here, coming down over to this area here.
Okay.
That's cool to see. Here they go back.
Yep.
And then
And it's the same route that lot did.
What's to have like a scale reference? Like, how many miles would you say? Like, from what I'm looking at here.
That is a good question. I'm not certain if there's one on here.
694, 94, 484, you know, like,
yeah, right.
Your reference.
Well, isn't it like 15 miles?
No.
Is it more than that?
Yeah,
Oh,
what
I
is,
think there's like hundreds of
yeah.
miles.
No, it's not hundreds. We discussed.
That's very wide.
I think we had discussed Bashan to Hebron is Minneapolis to Mankato.
125 miles.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, like this is 120 miles.
Okay, so
That's
that'd be
about-
3 hours. I'm like,
okay, it's like about 2 hour drive. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, in real life it's 4 or 5 hours because there's so many hills.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Also no cars.
Yeah. That's an day's journey.
Yeah, literally. Okay, so I think we got this. So basically, we're then drawing a circle around Mount Seir, which I think you all kind of did. Yeah, right over here. Just make a circle around this region.
Red or yellow?
Actually, Mount Seir is here, so just like here, orange. So that's Edom, which if you look closely, Joe, you might like this. In Edom on the south, the very southern border of your map, if you look, you'll see a place called Petra.
Yeah.
That's where Indiana Jones was filmed. There you go. Yeah, I knew you. The one with the no,
Crystal Skull?
the Holy Grail. Or no, that's Monty Python. They filmed Monty Python there too.
The Crystal Skull?
But
Oh, right.
yeah, no, I don't know. I can't remember which Indiana Jones is it.
The Last Crusade. Yes.
Yeah, that one.
With the cup.
Yeah. The cut. Yeah, it's the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all in Petra. So it's the Edomites. The Edomites built Petra. So Esau's descendants. So, anyways, it's a really cool place. So, anyways, okay, so we got Edom. Okay, moving on. And so, to me, as our theme, okay, Esau becomes the 4th generation equivalency of Lot and Ishmael. Okay? This is why they're orange. So, now we need to continue tracing what Jacob does. It says Jacob goes from Mahanaim and crosses the Yarbuk Canyon. He wrestles with someone and calls that place Peniel. So we need to draw a green line going from Mahanaim to Peniel. I would probably actually just draw a circle around Mahanaim and Peniel like this, because it's very small. He basically just crosses the river.
I can read.
Let's see, my name is water, isn't it? Know what I mean?
Right here, non-Hayim, and then you see Peniel right there.
Yeah, I
It's that whole region.
circle and green.
Yep, green.
What's this reference point?
This is where Jacob wrestles with God. Yep. So the text I just read, that's where that happens.
Just love and genocide and wrestle.
Especially if it's like
And
the middle of the night and somebody just attacks you. It's 32. Genesis 32. Okay. So yeah, Peniel, got it. We're good. So now Jacob sends his servants ahead of him to meet Lot. Esau. So his servants probably headed down the Transjordanian on their way to Edom. Esau then says to the servants, I'll come to Jacob. In the meantime, Jacob is wrestling with a man in the Yabak Canyon. The question is, why? As far as I can tell, the text gives no clue. But my theory is this. Jacob is forced to stay in place, and it gives Esau enough time to come to where Jacob is, instead of Jacob heading south to Edom. So now we need to draw an orange line from Edom up the Transjordanian Highway down the Yabak like this. Orange. Yep. Correct. Correct.
How far down?
To that, all of the blue to the orange circle to Edom. Yep.
I go back down because you're going down for the mountains. Okay.
And they would have took the same trail. They don't cut through anywhere
Right.
because this is
Correct.
the trail.
Yeah, I haven't talked about it. Technically, there is another trade route right here,
Go through the middle.
called the King's Highway,
Oh.
but
wow.
it
I've heard of that.
it's not a major trade route, and the canyons are like this. So again, you wouldn't go there unless you had a reason to. Okay, so now we read Genesis 33. So Jacob lifted up his eyes, and he looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel, and the two female servants. And he put the servants with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, Who are these with you? Jacob said, The children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the servants drew near, they and their children, and bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And last Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, What do you mean by all this company that I met? Jacob answered, To find favor in the sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Jacob said, No, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand, for I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God, and you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. Thus he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, Let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you. But Jacob said to him, My Lord knows that the children are frail, and that the nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they are driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly, at the pace of the livestock that are ahead of me, and at the pace of the children, until I come to my Lord in Seir. So Esau said, let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is Succoth. And Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Padan Aram. And he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he had pitched his tent. There he erected an altar and called it.
She in a different classroom?
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay. Which he pitched his tent, and there he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. Okay, and so Jacob is delayed because he wrestles with a man in the Yabak, and Esau comes to him. They embrace, they make peace. All of the fear Jacob had of his brother for 20 years is finally over. Remember, Jacob is on his way back to his parents, Isaac and Rebekah, down in the Negev. He could have continued south along the Trans-Jordanian Highway, then headed west from Edom over to the Negev. This would have required Jacob to pass through Esau's land in Edom. Maybe this is the very reason Jacob initially sent his servants ahead of him. But the delay in the canyon caused by the man keeps Jacob in the Yabak. So from there, there's likely a serious hermeneutic issue in the text here regarding authorial intent, but we might talk about that another day. Bottom line, Jacob does not go south with Esau. Instead, he goes west to Succoth. So let's take a green marker and trace from Mahanaim to Succoth like this, and they're right next to each other. Just like this little line. Yeah, it's right next to it. So we're here, or
Red?
right here. You got Mahanaim and you got Succoth right next to
I
it.
saw
Just
it.
green, just a green underline is connecting those two spots. Okay. And now from Succoth, we want to draw a green line going up the canyon to the west to Shechem, like this.
Oh, and then straight up.
And then up. Yep. You got it. Well, that's my map. Or no, wait. Yeah, no, yeah, you got it. It's you already.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
That was when I did the other day. I didn't do it right.
You're fine. Okay, so now, finally, the fourth and fifth generation from Terah are finally back in the land of Canaan, and they go to Shechem. And I ask you, who else made this exact journey? Who else goes from Haran to Shechem? Abraham. In fact, the route we just traced is a route we have already traced once before. In fact, with the exception of Isaac and one other individual we have not read about yet, every single ancestor of Terah that is a part of the patriarchal families that become the 12 tribes of Israel eventually make the journey from Haran to Shechem. And so Jacob finally accomplishes the goal. And the 11 sons of Israel are finally in Canaan. And everybody lives happily ever after. And the story ends here, the end. It just ends right here. This is it. It's the end. So thanks for coming to class. This has been a really great,
That's what you,
it's a great 13 weeks. I really enjoyed this and I appreciate your interest. But no, like literally, that's the end. That's the end.
No, you're not serious.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No, if only.
You got like 6 more
If
members.
only the story ended right here, right? And so now we move on to Genesis 34. Except we are out of time. So not only are we out of time, but we also can't move on to Genesis 34. And the reason why is because we have to go all the way back to Genesis 14, which we intentionally skipped. So we have to go back to Genesis 14 because that is the start of the next thread that we want to pay attention to. So in order to move on to Genesis 35, we have to start with Genesis 14 next week. So that we're done for tonight. Thanks for coming. I hope this was of value. Ultimately, once this is all said and done, we will have read the entirety of Genesis, which was not my intention, but hopefully you guys are getting something out of this. So anyway, sorry tonight went long, but yeah, anyways, I appreciate it, everybody. So any questions? Anything?
Yeah. What's that?
Nope, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Right. Yeah,
I'm like scanning.
getting there.
Find
So
out.
okay, thank you.
Getting there.